Most bubble tea brands are struggling. Some are quietly despairing. Right now, as we speak, somewhere across China, another bubble tea shop has just quietly floated. And it's all a bit better in it. And here is the real kicker. Their whole way of making money is worlds apart. At first I thought, it's gonna be the product. And it, fancy ingredients, better taste. But the more I dug into it, that theory just didn't hold water. Then I thought perhaps it's just clever marketing, stronger branding, more exposure. But again, that didn't quite explain it either. So I started digging a bit deeper. Financial reports, interviews, industry data, and somewhere along the way, I stumbled across something rather unexpected. These companies aren't even doing the same business, and the more I looked, the clearer it became. This industry is heading towards something quite specific. In the end, there might only be two ways to make money here. But we will come back to that.
Because to understand what's happening now, that we need to go back a bit. For now, let's wind back the clock and look at what actually happened. About 10 years ago, something interesting happened. The whole industry was obsessed with just one thing: premium. And I mean really obsessed. We're talking about ditching those dirt cheap 501 powders for 30-win luxury blends, moving out of tiny street stalls into posh shopping centers. And pretty much everyone was racing in the exact same direction, trying to be better, a bit fancier and more premium. Everyone was fixated on the same question: who can make a better drink? And on the surface, yeah, that makes total sense, doesn't it? But here's the rub. That path has a massive ceiling. I mean, think about it for a second. How much fresher can fruit actually get? And does using more expensive milk really make a blind bit of difference? At some point, or when everyone's desperate to be better, here's the irony of it all. Customers just switch off. It's not that they can't tell the difference. They just don't feel it's worth the faff anymore. Let me ask you something. Think about the last time you grabbed a milk tea. Why that particular spot? Chances are you didn't give it a second thought, did you? It was nearby, it was convenient, or maybe you just went with a name you recognized. Most people don't really have a clear answer, and that's exactly the problem. So what happens next? Growth starts to stall. Those trendy new products, they don't stay popular for 5 minutes, and gradually, customers get tired, not with a bang, but a whisper. And when that happens, the rules of the game begin to shift. From what used to be an upgrade game, it turns into a game of pure survival. It's no longer about who's the best, it's about who manages to stay in the game. And if we're being honest, it gets more brutal than that. This industry doesn't require you to try harder. It doesn't wait for you to fail, it just leaves you in the dust if you're too slow. And once you're behind, you're history. The problem is, most brands were completely oblivious to all this. They kept obsessing over products, kept launching new drinks, kept faffing about with influencers, and then one day, they just disappeared. But in the middle of all this chaos, two people saw it early. One started from absolutely nothing, selling shaved ice on a street corner. The other was just a 17-year-old slogging it out in a tea shop. Two very different starting points and two very different ways of seeing the world. One grew up with a constant eye on the cost. The other spent years learning the nuts and bolts of how the business actually runs. And that difference, it ended up shaping everything. What's interesting is, none of this was random. In a way, the paths they chose were almost baked in from the very beginning. I mean, think about it. If you grow up with very little, you become incredibly sensitive to cost. But if you grow up working inside the system, you become obsessed with efficiency. And that difference is what eventually led them to two completely different solutions. Alright, let's look at the first player, Mixue. Most people see Mixue and notice one thing: a 3 UN lemonade, dirt cheap, and that's usually for where they stop thinking. But that interpretation, it's completely missing the point. Low pricing isn't the strategy, it's just the logical conclusion. So I started digging a bit deeper, and what I realized was Mixue isn't really a milk tea company, it's a supply chain powerhouse. But here's the interesting part: a supply chain isn't just about cutting costs, it changes how the entire game is played. To understand that, we have to go back a bit. Back in 1997, Zhang Hongqiao was just a university student in Zhengzhou. He set up a tiny stall near campus, selling shaved ice. People like to call this inspiring, but for him, it wasn't a story, it was survival. After school, he tried everything: repairing motorbikes, selling food, even farming. And over time, he became obsessed with one thing: price. Why is the same thing expensive here and cheap there? That wasn't just a question, it became an instinct. By 2003, he finally opened a proper shop. He sold burgers, fried rice, cheap food. That was the goal. Be cheap. But there was a problem. Cheap doesn't scale. You can sell 1,000 items a day. But after rent, after staff, after everything else, there's barely anything left. At the end of the day, you're just paying your landlord. Then came the turning point. In 2006, an ice cream brand appeared on the streets, selling for nearly 20 yuan. And people were queuing around the block. He saw it and thought, hang on, how complicated can ice cream actually be? So he made his own. They sold theirs for 20. He sold his for 1. And the result, his queue was longer. That was the moment he realized cost isn't fixed, it can be controlled, but only if you own the entire process. So in 2012, they made a decision most people didn't understand. They brought everything in-house, factories, warehouses, logistics. Instead of relying on suppliers, they became the supplier. Then they went even further. They moved factories right next to where ingredients grow. They're not buying lemons, they're sourcing directly from farmers. No middlemen. One entire layer of cost gone. And this didn't stop locally. Milk from New Zealand, cocoa from Ghana, fruit from Vietnam. This isn't sourcing, this is global integration. And here's the result. Their costs are unbelievably low enough to sell lemonade at that price and still make money. And here's the real problem. Others can copy the price, but they can't copy what makes it possible. Now, look at this. It took them 20 years to reach 10,000 stores, then just one more year to reach the next 10,000. That's not just growth, that's compounding. And here's where it gets interesting. In 2023, they made over 15 billion yuan. But get this, more than 98% of that doesn't come from selling drinks. It comes from franchisees buying ingredients, equipment, packaging, franchise fees, less than 2%. So step back and you'll see it clearly. Mixue is not a milk tea company. It's a company that sells a system for making money. They even supply their raw materials to other brands. So no matter who wins the milk tea wars, Mixue still gets paid. It's a bit like tech. Phone brands compete, but the chip makers still make the money. Every time you buy that cheap lemonade, you're not just buying a drink, you're looking at a system that's been built over decades. But here's the real question. Can everyone do this? Not really. It takes time, it takes capital, and it takes a very specific kind of instinct, and for most people, those things simply aren't there. But then, what if you don't have 30 years to spare? What if you need an answer right now? Because for most people, that's the reality, and this is where it gets interesting. There was someone who came up with a completely different answer in just 7 years, but the path he took, much riskier, no time, no room for trial and error. He had to figure it out in the middle of the most brutal part of the market, and he had to do it fast. The first time I noticed Chagee was because of a number. 7 years, 4,500 stores. For context, Starbucks took 25 years, 25. My first reaction wasn't admiration, it was doubt. I thought either this is a massive bubble or they've cracked something no one else has. So I started digging, and to understand why, we have to go back again to 2010. A 17-year-old working in a tiny tea shop in Kunming, nothing special, just a regular bloke. But he was obsessed with how the business actually worked. He stayed all day, from morning to night, to the point where his boss had to kick him out. 3 years later, he became a franchisee. His shop made money, but there was a problem. It didn't scale, change the city, change the staff, and everything falls apart. That limitation bothered him for years. Then something changed. He traveled abroad, South Korea, Malaysia, and everywhere. People were queuing for bubble tea. That's when it clicked. This isn't local. This could be global. He came back and saw Haiti exploding. And he thought, if they can do it, why can't I? But then he took it one step further. He realized something important. Haiti didn't just win because of the taste. It worked because it was scalable. He wasn't trying to make a better drink. He was trying to build a machine, something you could replicate again and again. By late 2017, he started Chagee, but the situation was brutal. High-end was taken by Haiti. Low-end was dominated by Mixue. He was stuck right in the middle. And then there was Chagee, the brand everyone loved. For a long time, Chagee was just seen as a substitute, that fragile. But during this period, he figured something out. He looked at their product, tea, milk, sugar, and suddenly it clicked. This could be industrialized, standardized, replicated at scale. In many ways, it works just like coffee. Now, this is important. He wasn't trying to copy Chagee. He wasn't even trying to make better tea. He was doing something else entirely. He was taking their product logic and doing the one thing they refused to do, industrialize it, scale it, turn the whole thing into a machine. And then something interesting happened. Chagee accidentally created a gap in 2021. They expanded into cities like Wuhan, and the queues, they stretched for over a kilometer. The entire internet was going mad. People were asking, when are you coming to my city? But here's the part that genuinely surprised me. They chose not to expand. The founder said something about dying with dignity. But every time I hear that, I can't help but think, that's not dignity, that's surrender. Because here's the reality. You leave the door open and someone else walks in. You ignore demand and call it a noble choice. But the market doesn't care about nobility. So what happens? Customers look elsewhere. And that's exactly where Chagee stepped in. In a way, Cheyenne USA trained the market, and Zhang Junjie, he was just waiting for his moment. Now, let's get to the core, efficiency. And to be clear, this isn't one clever trick, it's three things working together. First, speed. And not just slightly faster, we're talking miles faster. They use automated extraction machines, staff scan the order, and the machine does the rest. Their output is roughly 3 times faster than Haiti. 3 times. Same shop, same rent, same staff, triple the volume. What others make in a day, they finish by lunchtime. Second, consistency, not similar, identical, Beijing, Chengdu, same taste every time. Sounds simple, but this is where most brands break. Third, simplicity. They cut their menu, focused on just 3 categories, and here's the kicker. Their top 3 products make up over 70% of sales. One drink, nearly a third. Now, most managers would say, that's risky, not enough variety. Customers will get bored. But that thinking is backwards. Fewer products means simpler supply chains, less waste, lower training costs. Everything optimized for one thing, efficiency. Put it all together and you start to see it. This isn't a tea business, it's a machine, a high-performance engine. And what it produces is profit per square meter. Zhang Junjie once said he couldn't win in fruit tea and couldn't afford to compete there. Some people think he was being modest. Personally, I don't think so. I think he was being realistic. He chose a path others ignored and turned it into an advantage. But here's the catch, even that wasn't enough, because scaling this fast requires something else entirely. Stability, the kind that holds everything together. Before they even started expanding, Zhang Junjie had already secured supply. We're talking over 2,700 acres of tea plantations and a fully integrated system. The rule was simple, resources first, expansion second. And when they enter a new city, they follow a strict playbook. They set up a local entity, study the population, the spending power, the retail density. Then they plan 1 to 3 years ahead. Only then do they open a flagship store. And these aren't just any stores, we're talking prime locations right in the heart of the city. They're not there to make quick money. They're there to establish presence, to claim territory. Once that works, they move to joint operation stores to refine the system, and only when everything is running smoothly do they scale through franchising. Now, look at the numbers. In 2023, their revenue smashed 10 billion yuan. This year, it's expected to push past 20 billion, with a real chance of overtaking Starbucks China. And in 2023 alone, they opened over 1,800 new stores. Think about that, 5 new stores every single day. You go to bed, you wake up, and while you're brushing your teeth, 5 more Chagees just appear on the map. But here's the real question, is all of this actually sustainable? Because honestly, I'm not entirely convinced. In this industry, there are no secrets anymore. Everyone is working from the same playbook. And the only real difference now, speed. That 15 to 20 yuan price range is a battlefield. High-end brands moving down, budget brands moving up, and everyone else fighting for the same ground. But the deeper issue is this: the industry has hit a wall. Product innovation stalled, technology plateaued. There are no shortcuts left, which means the only way forward is to squeeze more efficiency out of every single cup. And those who can't keep up, they don't get beaten, they just fade away, not with a crash, but slowly, quietly, until they're gone. If we step back, Mixue and Chagee are really answering the same question: how do you become irreplaceable? Mixue's answer: control the cost, build a system the entire industry depends on. The bigger it gets, the more stable it becomes. Chagee's answer: push efficiency to the limit. Move so fast that by the time others react, you're already over the horizon. Will they eventually collide? I'd bet on it. As Chagee grows, they'll have to move upstream. Right now, they're on different tracks, but those tracks are getting closer day by day. And the brand stuck in the middle, they're in trouble. Not cheap enough for Mixue, not fast enough for Chagee. They rely on unique products. But let's be honest, products are the easiest thing to copy. Give it 3 months and someone else has already done it. So in the end, only 2 types of players stay: those who build systems and those who build machines. The rest, they get squeezed or outpaced, and eventually they're gone. But this isn't just about milk tea. Think about what you're building right now. Is it a product, a system, or a machine? Because products don't last. Systems take decades. Machines take years. And most people don't have the patience for either. So they end up as part of someone else's system, or they fade away.
And by the time you have finished watching this, somewhere in China, a few more shops have quietly closed their shelters for the last time. If you like this, please follow my channel. I'm Alex.